And welcome back to College Football Tradition. It is Wednesday, August 26th. We're talking about Big Ten. We talked about our SEC predictions, some teams that we're highlighting as well, who we thought was going to be the SEC championship. Check that podcast episode out as well. We'll get that uploaded potentially probably before this, hopefully. But again, tonight we're going to be talking about the Big Ten. I'm here with Lucas Miller, Miller Time. My name is Jacob Vanderford, and we're going to talk about some of the teams in the Big Ten that we think could make a Big Ten championship, could make the CFP, and just touching on some of those players and just some fun things that we're looking forward to in the Big Ten. But before we start out with the Big Ten episode, I do have a few trivia questions that I wanted to push your way, Lucas. So the first one is, which Big Ten team won the very first Rose Bowl game in 1902?
Michigan
Yeah. Do you know who they beat?
in 1902.
Yeah.
Um, Stanford,
Yeah.
is that correct?
That's right. So the Michigan beat Stanford 49 to nothing in the first Rose Bowl ever in 1902. Dang.
Ball knowledge.
That is straight ball knowledge. All right. And then let's see, what other question do I want to do? Let's do this. What is the oldest rivalry trophy game in the Big Ten? So not just rivalry game, but rivalry trophy game.
Wisconsin and Minnesota.
No, that's what I would have thought. You got another
All right.
guess? It's kind of a weird one.
It's not Illinois and Ohio State, is it?
No.
Well, would it be traditionally West versus East or no? Or is it in the same
Uh,
division?
I think it's the same division. Actually, I don't know. I could be wrong. It might be West
I'll
East.
I'll do one. Oh, really? Okay.
But make one more guess.
Well, I had one more guess, but now that you're not sure of it, then I feel like that it's not that because I feel like you would know that these two are in the same. Because then I was gonna say Michigan and Michigan State.
Yeah, but it's not that. So it's Purdue and Indiana. Like, is Purdue in the
Oh,
West? Or are they?
yeah, I think
Okay.
they were.
I was unsure because like they're in the same state, and I was like, okay, I would think that they would both be in the East.
That's so dumb for that to be what the answer is.
I know it's the old Oaken Bucket Trophy.
Yeah,
And that game started in 1925, but the teams have been playing each other since 1891, which is kind of crazy.
yeah, I immediately would have thought Wisconsin and Minnesota, but huh.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are those two answers.
All right, I got one of them.
Yeah, you did get one of them. I guess I should have said this earlier, but we'll do more trivia questions as we go through the podcast and things like that later on throughout the season too. So if you want to pause the podcast and test your knowledge, you can always click pause after I ask the question, give your answer, and then see if you match Lucas or if you got it right or wrong or whatever that might be. So that is our CFBT trivia. Now we're going into the Big Ten Conference. Now, as you know, you've probably followed us for the how many viewers or listeners that watch this, like 10 of you. I'm hoping to grow that though. You know that Lucas and I and Brian all have favorite teams that we followed since we were kids. And very indicative of where we grew up too. So for me, it's Nebraska. For Lucas, it's Penn State. For Brian, it's Ohio State. And so we're going to talk about those teams now. I'm going to start out by talking about Nebraska, though. So Nebraska football is a team that, ever since I can remember, the most games that they have won has been 9 games, and that goes back to the Bo Pelini years. But before I was born, this team was a juggernaut. 2001 was the last year that they were in the national championship game. They played Miami. got killed in that game, but they had Eric Crouch, Heisman Trophy winner. Um, and I wish this team could find a way to get back to that level. Obviously, 1970, 71 national championship winners, also 94, 95, 97. So five national championships for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Matt Rule comes into his fourth year. He's 19 and 19 overall. He's 500. But he comes off a few years where Scott Frost won four games, three games. Now, obviously, Scott Frost is back at UCF. Didn't work out. But Matt Rule prototypically has been a culture builder and has been a rebuilder of teams. Um, in his first year at Temple and Baylor, he was 3 and 21 overall. Second year, 13 and 12 record overall, both of those teams combined. Third year, both those teams combined, he was 21 and 7. Um, and so that we just haven't seen that at Nebraska. We had a 5 and 7 year to start, then we were 7 and 6. Basically replicated that exact same year this past year at 7 and 6, and lost in the bowl game to Utah this year. Last year we did win the bowl game, the Pinstripe Bowl against Boston College. Um, but Dylan Raiola obviously transfers to Oregon. He's going to be the backup behind Dante Moore. Um, you see a lot of overhaul on this team, especially on the defensive side. You've got Rob Orich coming in from San Diego State. I believe that San Diego State defense was 19th in the country in overall defense. But on that defensive side of the ball, you got Williams Nwaneri, who is former five-star, committed to Missouri, didn't play much there. He transfers over to Nebraska. This guy is what, like 6'7", 280 pounds, like just a complete monster. If he can put it all together, I think that this guy could potentially be a 7 to 8 sack specialist, on a yearly basis if he can put it all together. Then you've got Donovan Jones and Rex Guthrie at safety who could have some breakout seasons. You bring in some transfers. Owen Chambliss, I think, is going to be a breakout linebacker for Nebraska. He was a stellar linebacker at San Diego State. Dexter Foster at Oregon State. Then you got some cornerbacks and Victor Evans III as well coming in as a transfer. Some guys that I'm looking at to make some big impacts on the defensive side are Cam Lenhart, a returner on the defensive side. He had some really flashy games in his first year. Didn't do a lot this past year, but I think this could be a guy that could get some sacks as well. And then I look at Andrew Marshall. I think this guy could be one of the best cornerbacks in the league this upcoming year. Look for him to get a few interceptions as well. But obviously, the big name is Anthony Calandria. Calandria, for me, and I'm going to say this on the podcast right now, I think he could have a Johnny Manziel type year. Obviously, not going to be, that freshman sensation that Johnny Manziel was. He's been in college football for years. Started out at Virginia, wasn't great. UNLV, he was the Mountain West Player of the Year, had 700 plus rushing yards, 3,000 yards through the air. This is the perfect guy for the Dana Holgorsen offense. Dana Holgorsen has been at Houston, he's been at West Virginia, head coach at many places, and offensive coordinator within the Mike Leach family tree as well, the coaching tree. And so, if he can get this guy, Anthony Calandria, who can scramble, who can use his legs, I think that this could be a really good match, both offensive coordinator and quarterback. And Calandria has a lot of good targets to throw to as well. And Isaiah Hunter comes back from California. You've got Ja'Cory Barney, who is a stud this past year, both in the punt return game and then in the receiving game as well. Obviously, you're losing Emmett Johnson, 1,400-yard rusher. Fifth round pick to the Chiefs. But you've got some running backs coming in sophomores, Mekhi Nelson and Isaiah Mosey. I'm really high on Mosey. His dad is one of the coaches on the Nebraska staff. He was a high 4-star coming out of high school, moved over to running back from wide receiver. And then to kind of round out this Nebraska team, I want to talk about the offensive line. You've got Brendan Black coming over, a guard from Iowa State. You got Paul Mavenga from LSU, and then tackle Tree Babalade from South Carolina. Super cool name. I love that name, Tree. And so those three guys, I think, are gonna anchor the Nebraska offensive line, a line that has struggled for years. Over the past 3 seasons, they could just not block. Past 2 seasons for Dylan Raiola, he couldn't scramble either. So he, to me, was similar to Joe Burrow for the Bengals in the sense that, like, the offensive line just couldn't block for him, and he got sacked what, like 5+ times a game. So if this line can just be a little bit better for a running quarterback in Calandria, I think we're in good shape. And I really like our offensive line coaching duo, Jeep Wade, who had forget blanking on his name, Kittredge, I believe, All American. I think he was like the Outland Trophy winner at Georgia Tech one year. He is a really, really good coach and teacher. And then I really like Lonnie Teasley as well, running game coordinator. So if the coaching staff can develop and all of those guys that I just talked about can put it together, I think this could be a Nebraska team that could surprise a lot of people, even though they're projected towards the bottom of the league this year.
Now, as a Nebraska fan, what from a fan standpoint, not from like an analyst standpoint, what would be what would a result be this season that you would be happy with?
Probably 8 wins, I'd say.
8?
Yeah, I mean, if we can improve by one game, I would be fine with that. Like I just miss the 8 win years. If honestly, if we're 9-3, I would be extremely happy. Like if we can improve by 2 games, I would definitely take that. I just don't see us getting 10 or 11 wins and pushing for a playoff spot or a Big Ten championship spot. But if we can get a solid bowl game, um, and just get out of these like Pinstripe Bowl, Vegas Bowl. Like if we can get a solid bowl game, I think that could propel us into next season, and that then next season we could potentially be a I don't know, maybe a playoff contender, Big Ten championship contender. But yeah, I think I'd be happy with 8, 9 wins this year.
Yeah, I could see 8 from them. I mean, I think that like they, obviously they play Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State, and then like the Washington game could be tough, but
Yeah.
um yeah, there's definitely some opponents that I think you guys will fare well against. You have your Michigan States and your Marylands and Rutgers, the likes of the Iowa game at the end of the year. So
Yeah. Well, talk to me about your guys in Penn State. You're bringing in Matt Campbell from Iowa State. A lot of good transfers. I look at Rocco Becht as one of the better quarterbacks, just experience wise, in the league coming in.
yeah, I think, well, first, I can't really talk about what's going on this upcoming season without, going back and talking about the Franklin era a little bit. He had a it's hard for me to really say that it was great, um, but like it was like he definitely did a great job at Penn State. Won 104 games there, 45 losses. Obviously, bowl record was not great. Um, he always had the narrative of you can't win in big games. We've seen that from time to time, obviously, almost year in and year out. Against Ohio State and Michigan with the likes of a couple big home games, whiteout games. Fared well at times against the SEC. They beat Auburn twice. But yeah, I think he really definitely, you got to give him credit before I move on and talk about this upcoming season because he definitely dug that program out of what was a really dark spot. For the school in general, and then also for the football program. You got to give Bill O'Brien some credit as well for that as well. But yeah, I mean, talent wise, Franklin always had him recruiting great. We've had so many. I've been fortunate at least to watch so many great defenses from Penn State over the years. That's something that's always been a strength of that football program. And they've been replenishing that aspect of the team year in and year out. So now it was a really interesting way for that to all end now with Franklin getting fired after that Northwestern game. I was at that game, and it was kind of like a surreal feeling of like, you know, you didn't want to really see him go out like that. And it was the game that Alar got injured. But at the same time, like, there was like so much happiness and relief, I think, in that stadium at the time, because like you knew that there was like hope for like a new chapter to kind of turn to. And I would never have thought that that new chapter was going to come from getting a coach like Matt Campbell. Um, but here we are. That was honestly, I was really stoked by that. I think that was a great hire, and I'm really excited for everything that he's about to bring to the table. He's a PA guy. He's got a lot of ties to Penn State, and he's bringing a lot of guys over in the transfer portal from Iowa State. which I always think is kind of interesting when so many players come with a coach. Because like we talked about um, Oklahoma State and North Texas, like it's kind of like the same team. And you do kind of look at it like, would Iowa State win a certain amount of games with this schedule? But I think there's like a fine line in thinking of it that way. So I don't know. I'm very optimistic for Penn State going into this season. Now they do lose a very substantial amount of talent on both the offensive side of the football and the defensive side of the football. We've gotten used to Penn State having great running backs over the years. Think back to the days of like Kajana Carter, way back. Saquon obviously really made a name for himself in state college, and he had backups that were great, like Miles Sanders. And now recent years, you've had the hometown kid of Nick Singleton, and then Katron Allen, which was a great 1-2 punch. And they also had a pretty good amount of backups behind them as well. Think of guys like Corey Smith, that were kind of following in the footsteps of those two. They kind of really fell apart actually in the running back room because so many guys had left, either for the NFL or for the transfer portal. And what they brought in, I honestly didn't expect them to have this much of a turnaround. But they bring in Carson Hansen, who is a very solid running back coming over from Iowa State. He's paired with his old quarterback, Rocco Beck, which I'll get into in a second. And then they bring in James Peoples. He comes over from Brian's Ohio State Buckeyes. He was a pretty good running back there, back up to Travion Henderson, I believe. So I feel like that will be um, a pretty dynamic running back duo at Penn State. They're both, older running backs, as far as class wise goes. So I think that that's a really good way to start the Matt Campbell era is have that foundation of the good running back room. The tight ends is something that is also um, very storied at Penn State. You had guys like Mike Gesicki and Pat Fryermuth, just to name a few, and then Tyler Warren. We've seen that he was incredible there as well. They have one of the deepest tight end rooms that I've seen this season. They have so many tight ends on the roster. I don't really know what they're going to do with all of them. They're probably going to rely heavily on like a 12 personnel set with the tight ends being on the field. That's something that we've seen Penn State utilize a lot. Like I said, with Tyler Warren, they had Khalil Dinkins, that would both kind of line up in different formations. They bring back Andrew. I can never pronounce his name right. Andrew Raplia, a tight end that's been there for a few years. And then they bring in Ben Brahmer, who has been really lighting it up in camp this offseason. He
He's
comes
from
over.
Nebraska.
Is he?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Small
well
town
then
Aurora.
then you're familiar with him. He comes over from
Yeah.
Iowa State. So that gives sure hands for quarterback Rocco Beck to come in. So that's where I kind of want to pivot to talk about him. He's been pretty exciting to watch the past couple years. Obviously, Iowa State is always kind of hanging around in that like 7-win, 8-win category where like they could really make a jump, but they never quite really do for like the Big Ten contention or the Big 12 contention, or they make it that far and they lose in the conference championship. But Rocco Becht is I believe he's a fifth-year quarterback by now. And I think that he reminds me a lot of like the Sean Clifford and Trace McSorley type of quarterback when you think of Penn State. He has a very similar build to those quarterbacks. I believe he's only like 6'1", which McSorley was the shortest of the recent quarterbacks at 6 foot. He also brings in that kind of dual threat component, which we've seen so many quarterbacks at Penn State have. And I think something that really is going to help him this year is the fact that they brought in so many familiar faces for that offense. They bring in a couple of other receivers on the offensive side of the ball to pair with Rocco Beck. But then, like I said, the defense is always something that Penn State prides himself in. They lose a lot on that defensive line. They actually don't really have that many returns at all on the defensive line, which is something that's usually huge for them. But one thing that's really great for this defense that I think is going to be sort of like an anchor for this Penn State team this year, they bring back Tony Rojas. He's been there for a number of years. He's a junior now. We saw him have so many great plays over the years at Penn State. He had a pick six in the SMU playoff game. He's just been really a leader and a captain on the defensive side of the football. So to have him, and then they also have Darius Dixon coming back, which is one of their top corners. He's only a sophomore, so they get a little bit of youth on that defensive side of the ball. So those two, just to name a few, because I feel like the defense, like I said, is always something that is really the key component to Penn State teams. When we saw them go to the Rose Bowl, when they played USC, they had guys like Grant Haley, Marcus Allen, Brandon Bell. They had so many great players on the defensive side. And we saw that again 2 years ago once they made the playoffs and went on to play Notre Dame. They had a lot of really great talent on the defense. Um, Now, schedule wise, I'll make this quick so we can get on to the next teams. But you couldn't ask for a more favorable schedule, I think, if you're Matt Campbell going into your first year. They dodge Ohio State, which is amazing. Unfortunately, they do have to travel to Ann Arbor to play Michigan, which has been just notably a tough spot for this team while James Franklin has been the coach. Um, but as usual, they play a couple of teams from like the Sun Belt and the MAC to start out the season. They'll have the stripe out right away against Marshall. That was a really interesting decision because they'll kind of try and set the tone with that fan base right away. The first game of the season is going to be against Wisconsin in the Big Ten. Um, that one I think is huge for Matt Campbell as well. They travel to Northwestern's new stadium, and then it's the big game against USC, which is noted as the whiteout game this year. The only other game on the schedule I think is huge for them is at Washington. That's one I just don't really know. Um, I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like, obviously, until we get things started here, especially against Wisconsin. That's like when you really have your first opponent. Um, but I think that they have a couple games this year that are really going to tell the story of like what the identity is made of under Matt Campbell, and he has plenty of opportunities this year to show that to the Nittany Lion fan base. Because, like I said, you really don't get a better setup schedule wise than he has this year. Um, with that being said, I have them losing at Michigan and I have them losing at Washington, and then I have them winning every other game. So that's
Uh,
very ambitious because I don't know how they would get to 10-2 under his first year. But just talent wise, I feel like they have an edge over Wisconsin. I feel like they have an edge over Minnesota. Um, Rutgers and Maryland at the end of the year, I'm not super worried. But the USC game, I'm kind of just basing that entirely off of momentum in the whiteout. But I know that at Michigan and at Washington are just very daunting for him to go into his first year there.
yeah. Definitely an exciting Penn State team, and I feel like over the years, like I've talked about previously, like Iowa State has been a team that is always in the top 25. It felt like they were always even in the top 15. So I don't think it's too ambitious to say that Penn State could be a 9-3, 10-2 team this year. So exciting times for State College. Okay, so pushing ahead, I'm going to talk about Michigan next. So taking it to the big house. Obviously, they get a new head coach this year from Utah. That is Kyle Whittingham. He had 21 seasons at Utah, and took over for Urban Meyer in previous, and so there have only been three coaches in Utah history. Kyle Whittingham moves on, and he takes over a Michigan team. And I believe Kyle Whittingham is 62, 63, something like that. So has a lot of experience coaching, and has a lot of experience in rivalry games. I think Ohio State fans will be interested to know that it's for Michigan, it's always or for Kyle Whittingham, it's been Utah against BYU. Now it's going to be Michigan against Ohio State. Kyle Whittingham has experience in those rivalry type of games. So it's going to be interesting to see how Ohio State fares, how Michigan fares within those battles now. Now that Michigan definitely has a higher quality coach and staff. He also brings over Jay Hill from BYU, who was one of the best defensive coordinators in the country this past season. And then Jason Beck, who again is a Broyles Award finalist. I feel like every year as an offensive coordinator, and took Devin Dampier to become the facilitator of a top 10 offense for Utah this past season. So I am really excited to see what this Michigan team can do. I think Bryce Underwood is going to be a really, really solid quarterback in his second year in this. It's a new system, obviously, but I think Jason Beck has a way with quarterbacks, and Bryce Underwood is one of the most talented quarterbacks I think we've ever seen in college football. The just the velocity and the way in which the ball comes out of his hands, and his ability to run. Not a lot of people talk about his dual threat ability. I think this is a guy that could eclipse 3,000 yards passing and upwards of 700 yards rushing this next season. So I think he definitely is going to have a breakout season this year. So I'm really excited for Michigan. And I'm gonna run through this so we can get through some of the other teams. But looking at a Trey Pierce on the defensive side, Troy Bowles, Jair Hill, John Henry Daly is a star defensive end from Utah. He's gonna get a lot of sacks for them this year. And then yeah, I mean they bring over some solid tight ends as well. I look at Buchanan, who comes over from Utah. I think he's going to be great for Michigan. So I think Michigan is going to be a really solid team this year. I think they're going to be a 10-win team and are going to be pushing for CFP contention in Kyle Whittingham's first year. Um, so moving forward, I guess, Lucas, to you, I know you don't love talking about Ohio State, but if you want to dive in a little bit to what they're offering this year,
Yeah, I'll talk about them and then I'll hit on Washington quick and then I can send it back to you.
sounds
How's that
good.
sound? All right. Yeah, Ohio State, I mean, every year they are pretty much the, preliminary team in the Big Ten. Even last year going into it, they were pretty much sought after as like the number one team, and then Indiana just pops off out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Buckeyes are pretty much they've set the standard over time in this conference. And they bring back Julian Sand. Once again, they always have talent at the quarterback position. We'll see a big matchup with him and Arch Manning early on. Bo Jackson comes back. He was a great running back. Um, they also bring in um, a couple of experienced linemen at the front. They return Luke Montgomery and Austin uh, I'm never going to pronounce that right. Searveld, I believe.
Sounds right.
Yeah, so they bring both of them back. The offensive line is something that's always been great for them, especially when they get late in the year and it's time for that push in November, playing against Michigan, playing against a couple other teams in the Big Ten where they can run the ball very well. And then, of course, you can't talk about Ohio State unless you talk about the wide receiving group.
Yeah.
Um, Jeremiah Smith, future most likely number one pick in the NFL draft. Brandon Inniss is back again. He is a superstar on that offense. And then they have Chris Henry Jr., who looks to be the next receiver up in this, just historic run that they're on with receivers. Um, they also bring in a couple other guys in the receiving group. That's Devin McEwen from UTSA, Kyle Parker from LSU, Mason Williams comes up from the Ohio Bobcats. The offense is just always super high powered. The defense always really just follows behind. I mean, they've had so many great running backs over the span of the past couple years. You think of Sonny Styles, you know, so many guys that they've had where they're really just the anchors of that defense. I don't really see much changing, to be totally honest, with the Ohio State Buckeyes this year. Clearly, they have that big test at the beginning of the season against Texas. And of course, they play Michigan at the end of the year. And that's kind of what the thing has always been with Ohio State every year is like they play Michigan at the end of the year. That's the one matchup that is
Yep.
always circled on that schedule. I haven't had the best of luck with the Wolverines as of recent years under Ryan Day. But this year they host them and they also host Oregon. So, they also have to worry about Indiana, but I believe that they'll have that one covered. But yeah, again, a tremendous amount of talent for Brian's Ohio State Buckeyes as we head into
Yeah.
2026. So we'll stay. Um, with me for a second. I'll talk about Washington a little bit. This is a team that kind of, I think, has surprised at least me thus far with some of the success that they've had so far in the Big Ten since they've moved. Obviously, they were great in the Pac-12. They come over with USC, UCLA, and Oregon in that move to the Big Ten. And it comes right after they were in the national championship game in the last year of the Pac-12 under head coach Kalen DeBoer. Now they have Jed Fish. He's going into his third year. He's done a great job thus far. Damon Williams Jr. is one of my favorite players in the country heading into this season. I think that he definitely should deserve to have his name up there in the Heisman rankings. He's a tremendous quarterback. We see him make a lot of flashy plays with his legs. He can obviously throw the ball as well. And if you're wondering who he's going to throw the ball to, they bring back Desmond Roebuck, who is just a highlight reel receiver. They also have Chris Lawson. They both, I think, could become stars. I don't know if it will be in the same, you know, aspect of that we saw like Romeo Doomsday and Jalen McMillan. Um, Back when they played. But they also have a pretty good amount of talent in the running back room. They lost Jonah Coleman to the NFL. He was one of the great running backs for this program. But they bring in Jaden Lamar from Oregon, and they bring in Christian Moss from Kennesaw State, who I think will also kind of get some like carries as well. So I think the running back room is in good hands. They bring back a couple of really good defenders on that side of the ball, including Zuri Alexander and Alex McLaughlin. Those are kind of the two guys that anchor that defense. And then they also have safety Rylan Dillon Allen and corner Dylan Robinson, who they look to as to be one of those stars on the defensive side.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that Washington team. I love Damon Williams. I think he is the reincarnation of Kyler Murray.
He's
So
so
I'm
exciting to watch,
Yeah, he just brings a lot of electricity to like any field that he steps on. But I'm interested to see how he does without Jonah Coleman and
for
Denzel
sure.
Boston. So
Yeah, I think they have a lot of talent that they can utilize with him, especially with Roebuck. I think that they're gonna have a great receiving room again, like we've seen the past like 3 to 4 years at Washington.
yeah. So switching over to Indiana, reigning college football champs. I never thought I'd say that about Indiana. But this is Kurt Cignetti's third year. Google him. He wins. He brings in Josh Hoover, former quarterback at TCU. The thing about Josh Hoover to me is I think he just needs to learn how to not turn the ball over. And he's just had so many interceptions the past couple years at TCU, which is totally different from Fernando Mendoza in the sense that like Fernando Mendoza protected the ball. But Fernando Mendoza was a little bit more under the radar at Cal and, didn't have the numbers that Josh Hoover had. So I'm just curious to see what Josh Hoover can do in this new offense. Running back, Turbo Richard, what a cool name. And he's looking to come in, have a better year than Roman Hemby. Hopefully, we'll see. Nick Marsh is from Michigan State. Hearing a lot of great things about Nick Marsh, so he should have a good season. And then Chaz Preston from Tulane will be a pretty big play threat. And we saw him in the CFP at Tulane make some big plays as well. So I'm really excited about the receiving core for Indiana. Then you've got some defensive players coming in. Chidi Obiizor, you've got Toby Osunami, and you got Notre Dame's Josh Burnham. All really good defensive ends, defensive tackles that will be disruptors on the defensive side. And then for me, Charlie Becker was one of the best wide receivers in the country this past year towards the end of the season. Early on, didn't make a lot of plays, but he really came on going into the playoff. And I think to me, he is Indiana's version of Wes Welker or Jordy Nelson. I think he just presents that same sort of big play ability and an ability to be shifty and out of the slot specifically. Um, Offensive line looks great too. So I think this Indiana team can make a lot of just big plays this year. Has a lot of firepower and is definitely going to be back in the running for CFB contention. I don't know if they're a national championship team this year. We're going to learn and see what they do with Josh Hoover. But yeah, really interested to see what Indiana can do. Um, Real quick, before we decide who we think is going to win the Big Ten, I just want to mention briefly USC. USC had a rough end of the season this past year in the Alamo Bowl. They lose to TCU, but Jaden Mayava had one of his better seasons as a quarterback. He threw for 3,700 plus yards, 24 touchdowns. He just needs to clean up his turnovers, but he had one of the better QBRs in the Big Ten this past season, just behind Fernando Mendoza and above Julian Sand, which is saying something because both of those guys were Heisman finalists. Um, if USC to me, if they can bring this defense along, I think they'll be a really good team. They They are returning some really good running backs in King Miller and Waymon Jordan. I think that is going to be one of the best running back duos in the country, alongside who we just talked about in Texas with Hollywood Smothers and Malik Brown. I think those guys are going to be really solid. But like I talked about, they need this defense to step up. Cameron Crawford, Jakeem Stewart, linebacker Jaden Walker. Those three guys, I think, will should be able to shoulder some load this next year. And hopefully Danton Lynn can be that defensive coordinator. Or like I talked about, Gary Patterson. Sorry. Hopefully they can, turn this defense around in this next year. So that is USC. That's Indiana. We talked about Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, Nebraska, and Penn State. If we didn't get to your team tonight, sorry about that. We will talk more about your teams throughout the year as we make predictions week to week, as we do preview shows and that kind of stuff, as college football tradition does. So, Lucas, as we start to wrap up the episode, who do you got in the Big Ten championship?
Yeah, this honestly, in my opinion, is tougher to pick than the SEC one. No brainer right away is Ohio State. It's just going to be a matter of who they're going to be facing. So if we have time here, we can kind of analyze it a little bit. Go down the line. I think they're going to obviously win against Illinois, Iowa, Maryland. I'll have them even winning at Indiana. The USC and Oregon game are both huge for Ohio State. I even think they're going to beat Michigan at the end of the year. I think they'll get that done. Um, but yeah, USC I'm really high on. I just don't know if they have what it takes to fully navigate that schedule. I just don't know if Lincoln
Yeah.
Riley's going to be able to do that this season. They got back-to-back games against Oregon and Washington. They're at Indiana. They play Ohio State, so that's tough. I look at Oregon. Them and Ohio State play each other during the regular season, so I don't know how that exactly would play out. Like if Ohio State beats Oregon. Oregon still has to play Michigan and Washington. Like, if they drop one of those games, do they still make the Big Ten championship? I'm not sure. It's just going to depend how these couple of teams kind of line up at the end of the year. I'm looking at Michigan, I'm looking at Oregon, I'm looking at USC. Um, Here's kind of what I am thinking though, and I'm going to be really optimistic about this. I think if Washington wins that game at USC, even if they lose to Oregon at the end of the year, but they get the win over Indiana, I think it could fall in their favor. Um, I'm gonna say Ohio State versus Washington, but realistically, I think it's probably gonna be a rematch of Ohio State and Oregon, which would be huge. Like that would be one of the craziest Big Ten championship matchups that we've seen recently, if it were to be Oregon and Ohio State. But I'm gonna put a lot of belief in the Huskies this year, to be honest. I think Jed Fish will get them. Um, Pretty far. That's more of like a fan vote as well, but I think either way, Ohio State's winning the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, I like those picks a lot. I mean, we didn't even talk about Oregon, but just to kind of break them down, they bring back Dante Moore. He, for me, is top of the list, going to be a Heisman candidate this year. 3,000 plus yards passing, 30 touchdowns this past year. They bring in they return running backs, Jordan Davison and DR Hill. They combined for upwards of 1,300 yards rushing. DeCorian Moore comes back, a healthy Evan Stewart comes back. Jeremiah McClellan, like that wide receiver core is going to be really, really good. And then you bring in a transfer running back, Simeon Price, Iverson Hooks from UAB, like a lot of really good, solid players. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you got Amari Washington, Barry Alexander coming back. Those are senior tackles for you, really good linebackers. DeAndre Robinson from North Carolina. And then my star player, I think, could be the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. Coy Parrish, transfer from Minnesota. He is one of the better safeties I've seen in a long time. I think he's going to be a first round pick in the NFL draft. But they do lose their coordinators, Will Stein and Tosh Lupoy. Lupoy is going to be at Cal, Will Stein at Kentucky. So I'm just curious to see what the new coordinators look like, how they do, how they fare, but this is a really good Oregon team to inherit. I think it's going to be Ohio State and Oregon. I just think both of those teams are going to be really exciting to watch throughout the whole entire year. And then it's going to be Dante Moore and Julian Sayin in a Big Ten championship game. Like, what more can you ask for? Those are going to be Heisman contenders from the Big Ten. So those are going to be
Yeah.
my picks. But I mean, we could also potentially see Indiana in there again. I think Josh Hoover is going to have a really stellar year with Kurt Cignetti as his head coach, and in a really, really good offense with great receivers, running backs, good defense. I wouldn't put it past Indiana to be back again. Throughout Cignetti's time at Indiana, first year college football playoff with Curtis Rourke. Then you've got Fernando Mendoza. The second year they win the national championship. Like it just seems like the trajectory you just got to keep going up somehow, but they can't. Will they take a step back this year? I don't think so. Like I just think Cignetti is going to find another way to get this team into the CFP again. And I think Indiana, we might see them in the Big Ten championship. But for me, I'm going to say Ohio State, Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Jacob, I think that like looking at it this season, there are so many matchups where it's like all of the best teams from last year in the Big Ten facing
Yeah,
off with each other that all like chaos could really ensue with Ohio State's schedule with them playing Indiana, Oregon, and Michigan. Like
yeah.
you have no clue what's gonna happen there because Michigan could come into the shoe and win at the end of the year, and Ohio State's sitting there with the one loss. Oregon maybe has one loss that's to Ohio State. Like you really have no idea. I think that you throw USC into the mix, and it really depends what happens with their game against um, Penn State early on in the year. It also depends what happens with their game against Oregon, and then like Washington has a pretty interesting schedule. Like I think there's really like outside of just saying, you know, the usual, okay, Oregon and Ohio State probably will rematch. There's probably like five or six teams realistically that could make the
Yeah.
Big Ten championship this season.
Well, and even like for me, I talked about Michigan a lot. They have a really tough schedule. They play Oklahoma in the second game of the season. They even play Western Michigan to start out the year, and like that. I mean, we talked about it in our Mac episode. We had them in our top there too. So it's like they're even their non-con is tough, but if they can win a lot of these games, I think that puts them in prime position to be a really good ranked team and pushing for Big Ten title, CFP. Like if they beat Oklahoma, they're going to be moving up in the rankings super high, like in the top 15, I would think. And then you beat an Iowa team, fourth game in. You got Penn State, Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. That
Yeah.
is four ranked team games that if they can win two, three of those games, like I don't know. I don't see a world where Michigan isn't in contention either. So like, yeah, like you said, there's so many good teams in this league.
I think this year this league is really putting like just the best on best and just showcasing how
Yeah.
much talent they have. And it's almost like the battle with the SEC is getting so close this year because of the success the Big Ten has had the past couple years. Like you would think that there would be maybe a drop off. Like they've had, Michigan winning the championship. They've had Ohio State. They've had Indiana, and like you're like, okay, are they gonna like fall back? It doesn't seem like it. Like they have so many teams right now that I think could win 10 or 11 games, and they
Yep.
all play each other. So it's like, where's the line drawn, and like who's gonna make it and who's not?
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy to watch. But super excited to see it all unfold. We love the Big Ten Conference. Talked about SEC and Big Ten tonight. Those obviously are two of the best conferences in the country. Some of the best teams in the country are in those conferences. So really interested to see how everything plays out. We've got football this weekend. We got TCU in North Carolina in Ireland. A lot of other really great games coming up this weekend. I am so pumped for Saturday. Yeah, anything else to round out the episode, Lucas?
I don't think so. I guess up next we would have the preview show for week one coming up.
Yeah, look out for that preview show. We'll be talking all upcoming games. We'll do our pick'ems. We'll do, some more previews on specific player matchups, head to heads, all that kind of stuff. But to round out our Big Ten episode and conference preview for the 2026 season, I'm Jacob Vanderford. That's Lucas Miller, and this is College Football Tradition.